My romantic, delirious adventure whilst pretending to be Victor Frankenstein amidst the sublimity of a great mountain blizzard. Yo, what's going on? It's someone, and welcome to another episode in Deliriant Week 2022. This report was sent in by SP, where he took Dicyclomine. And here's the full report details. Alright, so here we are introducing a potential deliriant. I say the word potential because it hasn't been explored heavily like that, but just know that this is an anticholinergic, the same kind of substance Benadryl and Datura are. It isn't just as well known. But the thing is, I wouldn't show this report during Deliriant Week if it wasn't a deliriant. This report shows just how powerful it can be as a deliriant. It's also interesting because of the unique writing and perspective coming from SP. You'll just see what I mean. I'm sure you'll enjoy this. Which, this should be one of the last episodes for Deliriant Week, so I hope you guys have been enjoying things thus far, and get ready for another good story here. So, without further ado, let's dive right into this. Presently, I write this while drunk at 6 a.m. in the morning, and so I may be more eloquent and romantic than usual, and sound like Emily Bronte. I've been reading too many Victorian novels as of late, thus, advance apologies for my histrionic pretentiousness, if it should get on your nerves. However, I shall openly attest to the honesty of the contest herein contained, and promise, however much my vow is worth, that the following story contains naught but truth, and that the prosaic embellishments are by no means exaggerations. Around October or so of last year, 2020, I was in the midst of perhaps the worst period of my life. I shall not go into the details of the causes of my despondency and inconceivable horror, as that is besides the point, and will require a whole novel to delineate. However, my cerebral torment was of an inescapable and insoluble nature, which no logic or reassurance could dispel. And so I began to turn to alcohol, and then over-the-counter drugs to escape from my personal torment. I would scavenge the medicine cabinet of my parents for any means to benumb and elude the ever-encroaching madness that was consuming my mind, and the emptiness suffusing my heart. I experimented with haphazard combinations of overdoses of drugs such as Advil, aspirin, paracetamol, naproxen, escitalopram, pseudoephedrine, all combined with large amounts of alcohol and caffeine, and also with hypoxic suffocation, which led me to a few almost schizophrenic episodes, repeatedly containing gossamer from Looney Tunes, of all things. Finally, I came across diphenhydramine/DPH, otherwise known as Benadryl, which I abused a total of 5 times, with doses varying between 500 and 1,000 milligrams, combined with copious servings of alcohol and caffeine, as well as other random shit. I have forgotten most of what I experienced these few times, but they were of a usual nature. The daydreaming, tachycardia, constantly forgetting things, and inability to think, etc. But one thing I would like to note is that, with most diphenhydramine reports, the problem seems to be with the hallucinations and delirium. I found no problem with these, but I'm surprised that few ever mention the tremendously sick and disgusting feeling one gets when undergoing anticholinergic toxicity. It is as if your lungs and insides were being slowly and painlessly melted by radiation, and then that melted glue entering into your esophagus and rising like mucus that you're about to vomit, or circulating in your bloodstream with a revolting, oily sensation. Or perhaps this is just a rare, subjective side effect. I don't know. However, I was caught by my parents once while high on DPH, and thereafter, I was locked in my room and closely monitored, as well as forced into therapy sessions and almost sent to the psychiatric ward. One day, a few months following this event, January of 2021, my parents trusted me enough to leave me alone in the house again. It was about 1 in the afternoon, and I was feeling very listless and empty as usual. There was no alcohol. I dug around in the medicine cabinets to no avail. Mostly everything was hidden or gone. However, I would not be defeated so willingly. I checked every drawer in the house and eventually uncovered my prize: a prescription bottle of 20 milligrams dicyclomine. Its beautiful azure coating upon the slender, cylindrical pill hypnotizing my drug-deprived eyes. I quickly took it to my room to research its properties. I browsed Earwood, but it appeared few had hitherto consumed this substance. I was to be the guinea pig. The only recreational use of the drug I managed to come across was some Reddit thread written by a doctor who suspected his 70-year-old grandma patient to be abusing the medication, which is commonly used to treat irritable bowel syndrome. I looked a little further and found out it was an anticholinergic, like Benadryl. This was all I needed to know. I spilled out 40 tablets, texted my then friend, who I shall refer to as Ali, that I was going to go on a romantic saunter with Delirium, put on 2 layers of green coats and my newsboy's cap, and set out. The weather outside was, and I do not exaggerate or enhance any details, all thunder and lightning amidst the misty prelude to an immense blizzard. I had not known a lightning storm could contain snow. I am sure that I was not hallucinating then, as it had been scarcely 5 minutes since I had consumed the drug. I resolved to set out towards the forest trail some ways up. I had chosen this location because it was one I frequently snuck out to at night, to lie on the snow in peace, look at the stars with my stuffed animals, get drunk, and self-harm. For context, I live in a mountain town. The trail mentioned is about a 30 to 40 minutes walk up the winding road from my driveway, which is lined with houses. When it snows here, it snows tremendously. The residual snow that day was about up to my knee, not counting the driveway, which was routinely serviced by plow trucks. The weather, apart from sunny days, which themselves are intense, are prone to spells of extreme emotion, as exemplified by the aforementioned snowstorm. Fluctuations between 40 and 70 degrees Fahrenheit over the course of a singular day are not uncommon in winter, as long as there are clouds present. Give me a moment. I need some more gin before I can continue. I'm running out of motivation. Proceeding up the mountain, the snowstorm had grown thicker. One random detail I remember was that my right boot was awfully loose and floppy, and it must have made me look like a buffoon. On my way, I encountered a family playing in the snow, 2 boys being supervised by their mother, sledding up and down the road. It was so long since I had seen a sled. I found the event almost peculiar, or perhaps it was the drug. They paid me no heed. Likely I appeared dangerous, dressed as I was like Vladimir Lenin while I was weathering the ascent of a mountain during a snow thunderstorm, or at the very least, it must have seemed suspicious to them. I don't believe at this point that the effects of the drug had set in yet. I was always inspecting and scrutinizing my own thought process to detect an imminent possession by Delirium. A futile endeavor, but what else could I do? About halfway up the mountain, I began to notice faint, paramecium-like objects writhing around in the snow, and everything had turned unusually gray, though I do not know whether that was the effects of the drug or the weather. Further along, my teeth began to clatter uncontrollably and my mouth became dry, but I kept my mouth closed lest I cause any passerby distress. Thus far, the effects seemed to be similar to diphenhydramine, and I assumed it was because they both led to anticholinergic toxicity, which induces delirium. It was also very difficult to breathe. And remember that I was ascending a mountain road. It was exhausting, and my heart rate was about 180. A handful of times, I almost gave in to collapsing in the middle of the road, upon a soft bed of snow. With a titanic exertion, I endeavored to pick myself up, but I found that my muscles had turned into rubber bands. Further, I did not account for the thickness of the snow, which hitherto was unknown to me, having been walked on the plowed road. It was higher than my fucking knees. At first I thought I was going to suffocate in the snow, and it took my poisoned brain about 20 seconds to realize the obvious solution, rolling onto my back. I stared at the sky for a few moments, which, through heavy snow and with overcast it was dark as twilight, it blinded my eyes. Then 5 minutes later, I finally succeeded, somehow, in standing up, and stupidly attempting to continue the trail. About every 10 steps of my one boot stuck itself into the ground and my foot would come out, and attempting to balance to get my foot back in, I would fall in the snow. Then drunk-like, I dramatically remarked the beauty and tragedy that had led me to this queer moment in life, lying still in my nature's mattress, waiting to be buried by the storm, listening to happy shouts reverberating within the mountain vale. The cycle continued for perhaps 30 minutes. Thank God no one saw me. The tourists were still over the hill I stumbled down and couldn't see me. At present, the storm had grown to such an extent that it compelled some of them to start leaving. Hearing their cars drive off in the distance and feeling so sick as though breathing tubes had been inserted into my nose and throat, I determined to do the same. As you might expect, I repeatedly stumbled on attempting to mount the incline to the road, and this retarded my progress significantly, sometimes resetting it. Notwithstanding, I eventually made it. While proceeding back to my house, I tried to be as self-conscious as physically possible about my gait, but my mind continuously drifted off into my imagination, and sometimes I come to again thinking I was still on my way in my dream, but in truth completely frozen or muttering nonsense to the howling wind and thunder. At this point, the majority of the tourists had departed, but one last car noticed me, and its inmates, a 30 or 40 something year old man and his wife, asked me if I wanted a ride. It was pure fortune that at this moment I was more or less conscious and not relapsed into a psychosis, so that I thought I could deliver what I thought were coherent replies. These required immense physical exertion, but I managed to tell him, "It's alright, I'm fine." And he said, "Are you sure? There will be no one to dig you up if you're alone here. Lots of tourists come up here and go missing in the forest." And I reiterated myself. Thankfully, he drove off. Once I returned home, I thought it strange that the effects were not as bad as I'd originally assumed, and was somewhat saddened that I made it back alive. As soon as I lay down, however, I began to feel sick as shit. Refer to my prior portrayal of it feeling like your lungs have been removed and respiration goes straight through your organs, while your blood has become oily vomit. Everything also felt like it was half unreal, and I couldn't confirm the reality of anything, or even myself. Although physical objects were right before my eyes, there was a gut feeling that they were dreams. The best way to describe my perception of reality during this time will be to compare it to just waking up after having an insufficient amount of sleep and being very confounded with the elementary properties and existence of things. Instead of seeing spiders, I saw miniature daddy longlegs jumping up and down everywhere on my blanket, but I seemed not to care. In the distance, flies buzzed, and I felt like the ceiling fan was in motion, although whenever I'd look at it, it was perfectly still. I did not move, as any movement felt sickly and required intense labor. I spent the next 5 hours or so texting my aforementioned friend, Owlie. As with diphenhydramine, I would constantly forget what I was saying or completely go absent at times. Time also felt warped, and singular minutes dripped by like hours. Despite being vertibly high, I felt wholly empty and horrific, and had only compounded my original state instead of ameliorating these emotions. I remember at one time seeing a transparent snake floating above my head, and at another time seeing the shadow of an Malaysian feast on my ceiling, replete with wine cups. Everything sounded distant and tiny, and I constantly thought I heard the front door opening and my parents coming home. Of course, there was no one. I also thought I kept hearing a low voice mumbling nonsense to me, as well as a pop 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 at the peripheral of my hearing. I also, near the end of my trip, saw a mouse emerge from a crevice in my wall. I wasn't sure if this was real, and still am not to this day, as I thought it looked too genuine to be hallucinatory, and my house does actually have a rat problem. But I've rarely seen any be brave enough to emerge into a room. By the time my parents got home, I was thankfully well enough to put on the appearance of being sober, although I still felt tremendously sick and movement remained difficult. Around 1 or 2 hours later, my convalescence began, and dear heavens, it was so nice to feel normal again. Here ends the tale of the time I took 400 milligrams of Dicyclomine. It is manifest at this point I should tell you not to do this drug. It's horrible, and C and C and C. But it's pretty useless, because let's be frank, if you're interested in it, no cautionary tale will unsettle you from going through with your plans. But yes, this was actually terrible, and you shouldn't do it.